All right, mics are live. We're going on the air. Hey, welcome to another install. Actually, the first installment of Through the Looking Glass with Flavoski and Snuglington. So, for everybody tuning in for the first time, I just want to go ahead and get it out of the way. This is a podcast where we could talk about anything, and it's mostly just and we want it to be very interactive with our viewers. So, you can join the Discord link we have in the description and join in and just talk to us about anything you want, anything that's on your mind. Personally, my introduction, my name's Flavoski. People call me Flav. I have a big background in medicine, know a lot about it. I'm very interested in disease process, things like that, as well as conspiracy theories and politics in general. So any topic, we can talk about it. How about you, Lucy?
Well, my name is Lucy. That is what Flavoski refers to me as. That's just a nickname. That's not my actual name. I am a male in real life. I have a lot of background in mental health issues, gaming. Welcome back.
Welcome back, Slag.
And my name is Snuglington, otherwise known as...
I think you cut out. Hello? Lucy?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. You cut out for a second. Slag, you back?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, go ahead and introduce yourself, man. We're live on the air.
Oh, okay. Hello, I'm Slag Nasty. Just glad you could join us. Me and my friends, Flav and Snuglington.
So tonight's topic, what are we going to talk about tonight, guys? We got a few issues that we wanted to delve into in our flagship broadcast. I think the most interesting that we could talk about was if you've ever heard about Morgellons, which originally was written off as just a delusion, just a subset of delusional parasitosis, which was really interesting. And it kind of came up yesterday. I was talking to my uncle, and he was like, have you heard about Morgellons? And I was like, yeah, it's just a bunch of crazy people. It's just delusional parasitosis. And he was like, nah, you need to look into it. New studies are coming out that have found that it's actually a real disease process. And so I started looking up the studies. One came out like last year, and then one was a more recent, maybe 3 or 6 months ago. And it's actually been highly associated with tick-related illnesses and Lyme disease. And just what's happening is these people, as a reaction to the illness, are producing these fibrous bodies in their skin. And what it is it's just creatine or keratin. It's what makes up your hair, your nails, things like that. And it's really interesting because you got to think about it like this. Not just because the disease is interesting, but these people were treated like they were crazy for a long time, and you can only imagine what effect that would have on them. And that's why you probably see, if you ever look up the videos on YouTube, these people have half gone crazy and think that bugs are living in their skin, and they're using all these homemade remedies that just aren't really doing, and they've literally lost their minds because they were shunned by the medical community. And anytime you see a patient have to become their own doctor, it really makes me sad inside just to see something like that. And I don't think in our society that things like that should still be happening. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I got two. The first is I remember when fibromyalgia was supposedly a big joke.
Oh, really?
And to tie into your point about becoming your own doctor, some people were spending a lot more money.
Money on what?
Sorry, I'm just hearing something else. But they were spending a lot of their own money on concierge doctors. And now it's turning out, now they're releasing medication for fibromyalgia. But I agree with you. It's got to be super frustrating to feel ill, to feel uncomfortable in your own body. And you got, medical professionals who people respect just telling you like you're faking it. And what about the potential for like disability? People are going to laugh in your face about it.
Oh, definitely, man. I mean, it's got to take a toll on people. And I know people in my life that suffer from fibromyalgia. And even though they were seeking treatment and it was a recognized medical illness, it took a hell of a toll on their lives because the treatment doesn't seem to be helping them. And it also came up, like, I was reading this scholarly article today on scurvy, where scurvy was cured a long time ago, but they didn't know they didn't know how it was cured. They didn't know that vitamin C was what cured it, but they were drinking lemon juice, and it was back in the day, lemon and lime were interchangeable. And what they were doing is, after a while, the Royal Navy switched to limes, which had, I think, less than half the vitamin C. Plus, they were keeping it in these copper pots that destroyed vitamin C. And it just
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but also at that point in time, they were using steam travel, so it wasn't as much of an issue. So that's actually a point where scientific advancement can actually hinder advancement in other parts of medicine and health and just technology in general. And it didn't really become apparent that the issue wasn't solved until they started trying to explore, I think it was Alaska, and the lime juice just wasn't working. And then they came up with a whole new theory of what was causing it, and they thought it was like bacteria, because bacterial theory was becoming very prominent at that point in time. And they thought that it was something wrong with the meat that they were eating, and they found out, well, if we eat fresh meat, we don't get sick. And so they thought that it was the meat. But fresh meat contains vitamin C, but if you take meat that's not fresh and you like can it or salt it, you destroy the vitamin C in it. And it wasn't until those expeditions of, I don't remember if it was Antarctica or Alaska, I'm going to say Alaska, that the problem arose again, and it just dumbfounded scientists until they finally were able to run experiments and isolate ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C. And it took, like, it's a horrible illness, and it's so easily preventable. And you got to think, like, maybe 100 years in the future, what illnesses are we going to be looking at that we thought were almost incurable or very hard to treat today, that we're going to be just smacking ourselves in the head going, man, this was easy, you know? Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, that's one of the only areas where I'm actually very sympathetic towards, the environmentalist cause, typically the more leftists cause in politics today, is where the rainforests are being chopped down. Normally, I wouldn't care that much, but, there's so many unexplored, potential medicines and species we haven't found yet, and
Definitely.
It is a shame that all that goes away and we don't really know.
I think the big takeaway is you got to have an open mind. Like case in point, I linked that Wikipedia article on Morgellons while Flav was talking, and it's under the quackery segment.
Yeah, and
and medical conspiracy theories.
It takes a long time for societal opinion to catch up with medical science. And I think it was Winston Churchill said, and this could be a false quote, I'm not sure, that in the time that it takes a lie to run around the world 3 times, the truth is just getting its pants on. And that's very true in our society. And that goes into like other drugs like antidepressants, where you're not only pressured by society to take antidepressants, you're not only pressured by your doctor to take antidepressants, but if you look at the medical science on it, a lot of medical studies on antidepressants, it's just not significant. If you give group A a placebo and group B the antidepressant, the group B suffers from more negative side effects, of course, because they're taking a drug, but both groups really don't show a substantial improvement. And what you'll find is that this is just clever marketing on the side of the pharmaceutical companies to make their drug look effective. And it's really not. But you have societal pressure telling you that you need to take this drug to feel better when the medical science just really isn't clear yet.
I just don't think that, I think that it's part of a curing process. I don't think any one thing can just solve everything. I think there's like a whole wellness issue, like how much sleep are you getting? How much stress are you under? You know what I mean?
Well, when I look at mental health issues, there's obviously things like schizophrenia, that I could not say that you eating a good diet or you getting enough sleep is going to cure you. Obviously not. But then you look at things like anxiety and depression, and you really got to think maybe it's a a effect of the way that we live nowadays. Like, yeah, of course, people in the past were depressed or and anxious, but they dealt with it better than we do now. Could we say that the issues we're facing now are more emergent due to the way that we live our lives? Like,
I honestly believe that it's potentially more likely that obviously people have huge issues that affect their life drastically, but you could make the argument that mental illness isn't exactly real. I mean, a lot of it does come from, your circumstances, how you're born, the chemicals in your brain and your body, your environment as you grow up.
definitely.
So there is a good case for that, ADHD, depression, all of those things, might primarily come from your.
You cut out again.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that there's a good chance, I believe, that depression and ADHD, while they are very real things, that they likely primarily come from your environment and how.
Yeah, how you
I'm
deal
not.
with the what'd you say, Slag?
Oh, go ahead, Fluff.
Well, I mean, it's definitely mental health issues definitely have something to do with your environment. Like if you look at cannabis and it's linked to schizophrenia, the medical literature is very clear that cannabis does not cause schizophrenia, but it does have an effect if you have a predisposition to schizophrenia, which affects 1% of the population. But if you smoke cannabis, that does give you a higher likelihood of that dormant illness in you that you always had the predisposition to becoming active. So, does it cause schizophrenia? No. But does it make you more prone to it if you already have a disposition to it? Yes, it does. So, that's what I'm talking about with the way that we live our lives. Everybody is prone to mental illness in some facet or some form, but is the way that we're living today and the way that we deal with these problems making us more prone to develop these disorders that are already inside of us?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I wouldn't have put it as eloquently. Because I do feel like you just said that we're doing a good. Some people do a good job of doing themselves in as far as that goes. They talk about like social media. It's like, well, one reason why social media has been linked to problems is because, say, there's a guy you hate, stop looking at his page.
Yeah,
Like, stop
exactly.
going and seeing how happy he is, and hating the guy. It's like just stop.
I mean, we could
Go
talk
focus
all
on something.
about online dating and how the internet has messed up human interaction. Like, 100 years ago, if I wanted a girl, I would go and I would find her out and I would court her, a courtship. And I would, get to meet her parents, get all that. But nowadays, it's just like, hey, I met you at Walmart, and now we're talking on Facebook, and I probably will never meet your parents till after we fucked 10 times. You know what I mean? Like it's just totally upset the balance. Like we are animals, man. Like a lot of people we're humans, but we're animals, and our bodies are set up in a certain way, and so is our culture to be more primitive. And now that we're gone through this technological advancement, where now we use machines to do most of our reckoning, it's really upset the balance in a lot of ways. And also that goes into another thing about addiction, drugs, and technology is have you ever heard the theory of addiction, rat paradise?
Yes.
Is that the one where the rat kept hitting the button until it died?
Well, yeah. So a scientist, I forget his name, he put a rat in a cage and he gave it 2 bottles of water. One contained, I believe, cocaine, and one contained just regular water. And it would always go to the cocaine bottle until it would almost die. And what he looked at it and he was like, there's something wrong with this. He's like, the rat is alone. It has no connections. It's afraid. You know what I mean? It's just bored. So what he did is he built Rat Park or Rat Paradise, which had everything a rat could ever want. Other rats to have sex with, mate with, form connection with, balls, a wheel, things to play with. And he gave those same rats the regular water and the cocaine laced water or the heroin laced water, And what he found was astonishing. These rats almost always chose the regular water. And if they did choose the drug-laced water, it was never to excess. And none of the rats OD'd. So it really shows that the problems that we're having in our society, it doesn't only apply to mental illness, it applies to drug use. And drug use is highly in correlation with mental illness. I think it's like 70% of our homeless are drug addicts or have mental illness, and they go hand in hand. A lot of the homeless have mental illnesses that go untreated. So it shows that people aren't inherently drug addicts. They're trying to fill a void that in this society they're no longer able to fill like they may have been able to do a couple hundred years ago. And I mean, there's been drug addicts throughout history, but it seems to be getting worse.
I've always been of the mind that most people who use drugs, their level of happiness and overall well-being in the world is not that of, I hate the term normal, but, a normal person without these sort of issues. So I've always seen it as that drug use is kind of a supplement to a bad childhood, because some of these people will never get to the level that a normal, healthy individual would, and, they're just seeking that out. It's not like they're trying to, get from 100 to 150. They're just trying to reach 100, where they've never been before.
Oh, like chasing the dragon.
I mean,
you think there's a difference between, excuse me, Flock, do you think there's a difference between just unwinding and indulging?
Definitely. I mean, there's definitely a difference between becoming an addict, or what you would say is an addict, and just, I've heard stories of people that use heroin recreationally and don't become addicted. They just once every couple months, they, snort a little heroin or shoot a little up, and it never becomes a problem. Or same with cocaine. And my uncle's actually told me lots of stories about how back in the day it wasn't uncommon for you to go to a party and there'd be a little coke on the table, and it was never an issue. You did a little bit of coke every now and then, and everybody went about their lives. I mean, of course, people got addicted most likely, but it wasn't as bad as it is now. You know what I mean?
Maybe it's a substitute for something else, kind of like what Snudlington was talking about with happiness, like trying to get to 100, just skipping all the steps in between, like having a good job or a fulfilling life, having a hobby.
Well, I mean, if you look at mental health nowadays, the first thing your doctor does when you come in and you're like, I'm not sleeping well, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, is not, let's try to find the root cause of why this is happening. It's just like, take a pill, just take a pill. And at best, it fixes your problem for a while, and it's just a Band-Aid. And at worst, it just makes you worse because now you're addicted to it. And that's another thing about antidepressants is they'll tell you these drugs have no withdrawal. But if you quit them, you get discontinuation syndrome, which is a $100 word for help, I'm in withdrawal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I can say personally that coming off of some of those antidepressants, it was extremely rough. I've never done too many recreational drugs, but I'm sure it's comparable to that. I took Cymbalta for about 6 months, and I felt like a different person for 3 months coming off of it. It's one of the hardest drugs out there to quit, and as an adult, I think you should.
Can you elaborate on that more, of feeling like a different person? Because that could be positive or negative. Was it a negative consequence in your life to feel like a different person?
Well, I felt more happy, and certainly people around me noticed that too. But what I quickly realized, as I became self-aware of, looking into my thoughts and feelings, I very quickly realized that it was almost just like a fake happiness. I wasn't actually feeling emotions. I just wasn't feeling shitty all the time. And it didn't quite feel like me. It didn't quite feel like my life, and everything felt like less of mine. The main problem I see with medication, is the side that, they're giving it to 20-30% of children these days without much thought, and without much input of the child.
I remember back in the day when one of the big things that we're talking about with drugs is that if you give drugs to a developing brain, it changes them forever. Like if you smoked weed when you were 13, your brain would never grow up properly. But I guess when it's legal, to your point, they can just do it kind of willy-nilly. And, I know that none of us here, we're all sympathetic to the human condition. We're not trying to blame anyone or throw any shade,
Well, I mean, I would say how Lucy said that it didn't really make him himself, but it kind of numbed the pain. I can sympathize with people that are so bad off mentally that they don't care that they're not themselves anymore, that they just want to be at that buzzkill level of contentment. You know what I mean? I think that's a very dangerous place to be, especially on a drug. But if life sucks so bad and you're in so much pain that being content is better, I 100% will say take the drug. Because if it makes you, able to live another day and at least be content and not in agony, I think that's a net win,
It also kind of depends on if it's contentment or just numbness, though.
Exactly.
Is it just a distraction?
Well, but then that would go into the ethicality of these drugs. Are you actually making somebody better, or are you just selling them something that dumbs them down? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see where you come from. Like, I had a neighbor who had a police standoff at his parents' house. He had the can of gasoline and everything. Yeah. And he suffered from depression. And he was telling them, this was back in the 90s, and he was a great guy. His name was Clark. He was awesome. He was like the cool guy on the block, And but he kept telling him, it's like, I don't like how I feel, like because I don't feel. It just turns everything off. So, for better or worse, you've spent a lot of your time thinking and being in your own brain, and then they come along and they say, okay, well, try this. It'll make you feel better. And maybe it does make you feel better, but at what cost, And so it's definitely, people are different.
I think the story that I get from a lot of these people that have been on these antidepressants is it's less about making you feel better and more about making you function in society. So they're giving these people these drugs, and this is stories that I personally heard from people that have been on them, that they were like, I didn't really feel better. It just made me function better. Therefore, to everybody looking in, I was cured. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, like you got your stuff together. So obviously you're better.
You're better. You're still hurting, but you're being numbed enough to function, and everybody pats themselves on the back. We got him better. But in reality, it's just a facade. It's a chemical facade. The person's not actually healing, Not to say that
it's amazing.
People don't. Some people
it's amazing the amount of times that you hear in the news or just in general, even in your own life, if you hear stories, where you hear somebody does something like commit suicide and everybody says, oh, I would have never expected that of him. I would have never seen it come. Really, I think a lot of it comes down to a repression and people just don't address the things they need to, It's our society's.
It also goes back to, okay, so quick facts on this, and, these may be a little off, but I think it's women commit suicide at a 70% higher rate than men, but men are twice as successful. So when I say commit, I mean attempt suicide more, but men die more often because they're more successful. So let's think about that for a second. Women are usually given a way to express their emotions. It's okay to be emotional, but men are meant to hold it in. And suicide, I believe, is the leading cause of death in young males. And I think that's because when you're young, you're going through all these changes and everything's getting hard, and society's like, bottle it up and keep on kicking, buttercup. But that's not manliness. That's not, it's just not right.
You're right about that, Favosky. I mean, nobody really talks about the issues of young males in today's current society. And I guess part of it comes down to the human nature where it's like, suck it up, buttercup, like you said, and just get to work. But, it's alarming when the numbers are multiplying for suicides of young men and addictions to drugs and things like this. It seems like people are ignoring the problem when, 50, 100 years ago, it really wasn't that big of an issue.
Exactly.
All I know, if Robin Williams came to me and said, look, I'm having a lot of problems. Let's go play some 40K. He was a big Warhammer 40K guy. Mm-hmm. Let's go play some 40K. I'd be like, hey, whatever you want to do. I love the guy, respected him. He's one of the celebrities I actually miss. And I think you can apply that to regular people too. Like if your good friend comes up to you and he or she confides in you that they've hit rock bottom emotionally, I think that says a lot about you as a person that they've come to you. And it always makes me think. It's guys like Heath Ledger. These people, they're so talented, they're rich, they're loved by millions of people, thousands, millions of people, But do they actually have a real friend?
Exactly.
Do they have something they can go to? I guarantee you Robin Williams would have gone to his mom if she was still around, And Heath Ledger, it's I just don't think these people had buddies, or if they did, they felt like it was rude or something to go to them. I mean, I don't take anything away from you. Yeah, there's that stigma, I guess.
And if you've ever dealt with depression and anxiety, I mean, I don't know your story, but I've had it happen to me personally. When I fell into depression and anxiety, the first people I turned to, other than my family, were my closest friends. And I'll be damned if I told you different, but every single one of them, but one person, which is my best friend, just stopped talking to me. I was ostracized. I was the what do they call it? The sick puppy. You know what I mean? And that's like the group survival mentality. This one's sick. Yep. We can't fix him. We got to leave him and keep going or he'll weigh us down, The
weird part is we apply that to other things too. Like if you go to a store with empty shelves, people will stop coming because they'll be like, oh, this place is going out of business. That sick animal mentality. Let's just distance ourselves and, go somewhere else. We, usually don't give a second chance. It's kind of weird. Kind of heartless, really.
It is. And I believe a lot of human behavior can be explained if you look at it in a primitive way. Humans are very primal creatures. No matter how sophisticated we act, we're one light switch flipping off from going totally insane. 5 minutes after this podcast, if the lights went off for a week, we'd be eating each other in the streets. You know what I mean? It would be mayhem. Not to get stereotypical, because everybody always says that, but it's true, man. I don't think enough people get that. And
it's
another. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, buddy.
I want to bring up another topic that I saw. I'm really into Joe Rogan. He talked about all the light pollution that we get. You know what I mean? And he's like, you go outside and you're just like, oh, well, there's a star, and there's another star, just a couple stars in the sky. But have you ever been out in the middle of nowhere with no light pollution and looked up at the sky and you can see the whole Milky Way? I never have, but I've heard about it and I've seen pictures apparently. But wouldn't that be amazing, dude? To see the whole Milky Way galaxy?
That is kind of sad that that's looking at the stars that our ancestors have looked at for millennia is a treat now. But
yeah, but I just feel like we're cutting ourselves off from nature. And maybe that's what kept our ancestors in, we see so many egotistical people that think that the world revolves around them. Well, I mean, can you blame them? All they see is right in front of them. I mean, fucking look up at the fucking sky and look at the Milky Way and tell me you're important. You're a speck of dust, bro. But we don't get to see that. We forfeited all that natural beauty for some fucking streetlights that moths gather around. You know what I mean?
See, I'm lucky. The town I live in, they don't have. It's actually a city, but it's really more of a town, in my opinion. They don't have streetlights, so it's kind of nice. Yeah. I get to look up. You can even see the clouds sometimes at nighttime. It's great.
You can even see the
clouds
I agree with
sometimes.
You. Yeah, dude.
You just go up in the mountains. Go up in the mountains sometime. Lose that cell phone signal, and just listen. All you're gonna hear is the wind. It's amazing. You just go up there, so quiet.
I've had old timers tell me, dude, that nature is changing, and what you get is you get a new generation of indoctrination. So when let me just go ahead and tell you the story so I can explain that point. My grandpa's told me that wildlife used to be everywhere. Like birds would wake you up, they were so loud in the morning because there was so many of them, you know? And as life went on, we destroyed their homes and there's less and less. And to him, he's like, man, the world is changing, like nature's dying. But then I was born and like the birds seem the same, you know? Because they were always in low numbers when I was born, or lower numbers. You know, still a lot of them, but you know, maybe my kids will only see a couple birds every now and then. They'll be really rare, and to them that'd be normal. So why would they act to change that? Because it's normal to them. But my great grandpa would roll in his grave, and I'm over here freaking out, like, where are all the birds going? You know, but our kids are going to be like, Dad, this is normal. Why are you so wigging? You know, like, but things are changing, and it goes back to an ancient Greek quote. I forgot who said it, but it says, societies prosper when old men plant trees for which the shade they will never sit in. And that says a lot, man. That's powerful. When you make a change in the world that you know you'll never be able to see the benefit from, but you do it for the future and for the planet itself, that's a legacy, man. That's a fucking legacy. That takes a real man or woman to do that.
I mean, I'm surprised sometimes when I see old people, you know, still kicking. I feel like our generation, a lot of people who are young with their issues just don't understand, you know, what it would be like to live another 60 years. Because, you know, like you were saying, my grandfather always used to tell stories about how every single day he would go and he would catch between 40 and 50 fish. But, you know, nowadays over the summer, I'll go fishing with him. We'll get one or two if we're lucky. You know what I mean? It's just the whole world's changed.
I heard about that. I had some friends that were big on fishing in California. They were saying that it got pretty grim for a while.
Who was telling me? I don't know if it was one of y'all or somebody else in Discord, or it might have even been my uncle or my grandpa talking about how you used to go out, cast your rod, and you could catch huge tuna, man. Big old fish. And now you're lucky if you catch one the size of your palm. And also my grandpa told me stories about how they would go coon hunting at night. And they would go out and they would eat squirrel dumplings, and you could just walk around in the woods and shoot guns and kill the wildlife and bring them home and eat them. But when I was young, I was like, there's no way I could walk out in the woods and shoot a gun. There's too many houses nearby. You know? There's not even, I mean, I hardly even see wildlife like that. And I live in a rural area. I believe it's rural, right? Rural is out of the city, or is that
rural?
Urban? Yeah, rural. I live in a rural area. So, I mean, it doesn't really make sense. And I mean, I've been to the mountains where it's like nothing, but still, I mean, it's not that many more critters, you know? I feel like we're really missing what our ancestors saw, man. I feel like the world is changing at an increased rate, and we're really starting to see it nowadays. But
when I went to, I took a trip over the summer for about 2 weeks to Yellowstone National Park and the surrounding area, and I saw more wildlife within a couple of hours or, you know, a day than I had in probably my whole life. I mean, you know, I saw a fox and a bear, and, you know, I've never even seen those things. And that seems so weird to say, you know, but
I think to tie it all back together to what we were initially talking about is maybe it would be a good dose to go out there. You know, we make fun of guys like Kellogg back in the day for prescribing just peace and quiet. You know, just go out into like a countryside sanitarium or what have you. But, you know, where I live, the Hollywood stars, they used to actually have a sanitarium out there. It used to be ranch country. They go up in the mountains and just relax, you know, away from the critters, away from the city critters, I should say.
Where I graduated from high school actually used to be the Pennsylvania hospital. So it was like a big, you know, sanitarium, a big hospital away from the city, you know, like 20 miles away out in the countryside. You go there today, you know, you still got 20 or 30 blocks of solid city and skyscrapers, you know, push northward of that. So it's a shame.
I mean, it also goes back, man. Like, what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought. But I mean, the original solitary confinement was instated, I believe, by the Catholics. And what they did is they would take you away and they would put you by yourself, and there would be a little, hole in the wall where you could look at nature and look at the sky and just have time to think about your sins and and repent. And it was just really interesting that is how solitary confinement came to be. I know it's a little off topic, but it's just really interesting to me.
Yeah, in the 1800s, they had this thing called the rest cure, which they would give to women with labeled as hysterical or with hysterical tendencies when they were really probably suffering.
Vibrators for that.
I never heard about that one, Bob.
Yeah,
but
is that modern medicine?
Well, do you know where the word hysteria comes from?
No, I don't. Do you?
Have you ever heard of hysterectomy?
Nope.
So hysterectomy is the removal of the womb. Hysteria, hystera, womb. When a woman has a hysterectomy, they remove her. I forget what I think it's. I forget what part of the vagina it is, but it's removing the part that's able to have the child. They call it to get the tubes tied. Well, hysterectomy and hysteria, that's where the word comes from, because it was originally associated with women.
I'm looking at it right now, Flav. It was called the Wandering Womb.
Yep, the Wandering Womb, exactly.
Back in the 1800s, a woman would pretty much be labeled as hysterical, which at that time was almost seen as like a mental health issue, like a slight hysterical tendency or depressive tendency. When she got out of line and, did something like said, like, I'm not making the dinner tonight, we have made a lot of improvement in mental health.
In the 50s, you know what I mean? Not make the dinner. Like, women's
especially
rights.
Especially the 1850s.
Oh, yeah. Man.
I think the Civil War started because of that. I'm not quite sure.
Something like that, man.
So they used to give these women who were treated with this rest cure, they used to give them pretty much just bullshit medication, tonics and clonics they were called, and pretty much they would just sit them in a room and just have them do nothing for multiple months, and that was the treatment back then.
Well, it goes back into our talk about antidepressants, and it's surely not on the same level, but what they would do with these patients in sanitariums and asylums is one, lobotomy, and also they would give them antipsychotic drugs like Thorazine. And what it did is it pretty much just put them in a state where they couldn't be a burden on society anymore. And you'd have this guy, that was maybe beating on his head, screaming, and you'd give him this Thorazine, and he would just lay there, emotionless. And you'd bring in the family and the doctors, and you'd be like, look, we cured him. He's no longer yelling. And everybody would pat themselves on the back and be like, oh my God, he's doing so much better. But inside his head, he's just pretty much paralyzed. He's still in the same, fucked up state of mind. And it's just horrible,
It's kind of like just trying to drown your sorrows. I mean, once you stop, your reality is just going to come back.
Oh, exactly.
When you're done partying, you're going to wake up and be like, time to go to the job I hate and hang out with people I don't like, and that sort of thing. So,
yeah. Well, we've achieved our over 30-minute broadcast goal that we hit tonight. Is there any other subjects y'all want to talk about, or?
Nothing I can think of. How about you, Stunk?
I would like to say that, even though we are talking about, very serious and at times depressing topics, I do think it is important to keep in mind, the more positive aspects of life. Me personally, I'm still grateful for what I wake up to every day, and, that I'm here, and I'm not religious, but, there's certainly something to every day you wake up and you're in this world, and, I think every day you live is a great day in the end.
And
I do have to say I agree.
I think the next broadcast that we will have tomorrow night, probably around the same time, is we're going to talk about the philosophical school of thought of antinatalism. So Tune in for that tomorrow. Antinatalism coming right at you. What's going on, Slag? You had a closing thought?
Yeah, I was just gonna say to what Snug said. I like Marcus Aurelius. You know, he said, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to
Very
think,
true.
to enjoy, to love." You know, we
Oh,
do.
definitely.
Even if you're in your darkest days, there's still you usually have more than you think you do. You know,
Oh, yeah, and
you
nobody
just got to
really
reach
knows
out.
what they have until it's taken away.
Isn't that the truth? We take a lot for granted.
We do.
Yeah, people get used to their environment because they're comfortable. They're not, likely to induce change, just because they get comfortable where they are in their life and their daily routine, and that's where a lot of it comes from.
Well, I think to a point that contentment can be worse than extreme fear because fear can be a great motivator for change.
As long as it ends one day.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah, I think I would fear living forever more than
Oh, definitely.
dying, honestly.
So that's another topic we'll bring up on our next episode. Antinatalism, fear of death and dying, and what would you do if you were immortal forever? Well, we're going to be signing off here. This was Through the Looking Glass with Favosky and Snuglington and Slag Nasty. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. EST. Signing off. Have a great day, guys.